To use the human body as a musical instrument is physically, emotionally, and mentally transformative in a way that nothing else quite is. Thus, the mere form of the Psalms, poems meant to be sung, already points powerfully in the direction which, as I shall suggest, the poems themselves are determined to lead us by their content. They stand intentionally at the intersection of God's time and our time, with all the tensions that brings, as well as the yearning for resolution. They stand deliberately on Mount Zion, where heaven and earth dangerously meet in the temple, but also look out upon the whole of God's creation. And they invite and facilitate that actual material transformation of the worshipper, of Israel as a whole, and of creation as a whole, the transformation of which they sometimes speak. And of course they do this because they are basically worship. The multi-dimensional worship in which every aspect of human life, love, fear, delight, anger, panic, gratitude, are laid as an offering before the God who himself comes to stand at the crossroads of time and space and matter. These might not seem to us always particularly pure or worthy. When the psalmist gets angry, well, should you say that in God's presence? Yes, you should. The psalmist has all this sin on his heart. Should God be allowed to see that? Well, he knows it already. Let's bring it and dump it there. Here we are. I think part of the point is that they are truthful. They are the sincere outpourings of who and what the worshipper actually is. You can't actually hide from God, so you might as well bring everything you've got and say, here it is. And when we worship our Creator with our whole truthful self, we trust, and the Psalms strongly encourage that trust, that we will be, as Paul puts it, renewed in knowledge after the image of the Creator. So the reason why the Psalms are deeply Christological is not simply that a few verses here and there point across the void from the Old Testament to the New and happen to land on Jesus. Psalm 2 at his baptism, Psalm 22 at his crucifixion, Psalm 47 at his ascension, and so on. They resonate with Jesus because he was the one who stood by divine appointment at the intersection of God's time and ours, of God's space and ours, of God's matter and ours. The temple where the Psalms were sung was an advanced signpost to the sacrificial joining of heaven and earth in Jesus himself. The Torah which the Psalms celebrate, God's law which transforms the worshipper from the inside, was an advanced signpost to Jesus' way of life. And the story they tell is the story he came to complete. Stories of malevolent enemies prowling all around, whispering lies and lying in wait. Stories of misery and bottles full of tears, as the Psalms do their strange work of drawing together the terror and shame of all the years to a point where it becomes intense and unbearable, turning itself into a great scream of pain, the pain of Israel, the pain of David, the pain of Adam and Eve, the pain that shouts out in that most paradoxical act of worship ever, why has it been abandoned? And then, of course, they are the stories of strange vindications, of dramatic reversals, of wondrous rescue and comfort and restoration. And they live together, these stories, side by side and frequently rolled into one, not so much as a source of typology or allegory, though like all good poetry, they invite and sustain multiple levels of reading. Some of you were in a seminar yesterday where I quoted a line, I looked it up overnight, and it is Mark Twain. He said, history never repeats himself, but sometimes it rhymes. Isn't that good? Isn't that good? Sometimes there are these places where, yeah, we've been here before. It's not quite the same. You get that in the Gospels. I just offer that to you as we need more ways of understanding how God's history actually works. But the Psalms offer collectively the great epic poem of the Creator and covenant God who will visit and redeem his people at last, and with them his whole creation. It isn't just, in other words, that there are half a dozen places in the Psalms which Jesus either quotes or the evangelists quote about him. He is living the entire thing. He is dying the entire thing. He is rising and ruling and reigning the entire thing. The Psalms exemplify and embody what I increasingly see as the actual authority of Scripture, not as a reference book to which we turn to look up correct answers, though it's full of those when the left brain decides it needs them, but as the great story which we learn by singing it, and by singing become part of it.